19th chapter of the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, which is the description of the island of Jambudvip. And we were in the last section. So the last section is of the chapter essentially is glorifying the residents of
Paperwork and no time for strategic HR.
Glorifying the residents of Jambudvipa, right? And this glorification is coming from the demigods, right? So some of the glorification that they have already said, the people who take birth over here are extraordinary. And as we'll see, they're speaking more about those who take to devotional service, right? So while they're speaking about people in general, but when we see that what is it that their aspect of their existence that they're glorifying, it is essentially the ability of these people to execute devotional service, to associate with devotees, to have a short lifespan, to perfect the devotion, and then go back to Godhead, right? So in general, of course, the devas, they tend to look down upon the residents of Bharatvarsha, lower planets. Radha Govind Maharaj said they look down upon them as insects, just like we look at insects. Bad body smell and ugly features, short lifespans, always quarreling, fighting, so that they kind of look upon in a more derogatory way, with the exception of, and we see this glorification is genuine, with the exception of those who have taken to the process of bhakti. Okay, so we will resume from verse 22. Kim duskarena kratubhistapovrate danda biva duyojena falgune nayatra narayan pada pankaja smriti pramustha titishayendriyo tasvat. Saran Prabhu, are we ready?
The demigod continued. After performing the very difficult task of executing Vedic ritualistic sacrifices, undergoing austerities, observing vow, and giving charity, we have achieved this position as inhabitants of the heavenly planets. But what is the value of this achievement? Here, we are certainly very engaged in material sense gratification, and therefore we can hardly remember the lotus feet of Lord Narayan. Indeed, because of our excessive sense gratification, we have almost forgotten his lotus feet.
So when the devas are glorifying the residents of Bharatvarsha, one may object that the whole process of Karma Kand is essentially to be able to rise to the position of being devas. And actually the devas themselves, as I had mentioned earlier on, that for every resident in the material world, there are only two destinations, either Bharatvarsha or the spiritual world. So one can understand that the devas at some point had actually been residents of the Bharatvarsha, had performed austerities and Vedic ritualistic sacrifices, and then taken this position of being heavenly kingdoms. So the demigods are saying, it is true, but just because we did it does not mean it's the right thing to do. Just because somebody works hard does not mean that the fruits are the most desirable. So in effect, they're criticizing themselves also. And they're criticizing those in Bharatvarsha who are too much invested in Karma Kand to achieve elevation to a higher planetary system. And why? Because the modes are a little weaker. over there. The mode of passion and ignorance are stronger. But the Devas say that because of excessive sense gratification, we have almost forgotten his lotus feet. The Devas are prominently in the mode of goodness. But actually, the mode of goodness is also considered to be an impediment to bhakti. From a practical perspective, it is seen that preaching bhakti to Brahmins is actually more difficult because they're already very strongly in the mode of goodness. They perform puja, they perform the rituals, and they're also enjoying the benefit of the modes of goodness. Right? Later on, Krishna will, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that knowledge and illumination is synonymous to happiness, that knowledge and happiness is the byproduct of mode of goodness. So they're happy and knowledge. So at least they're not in ignorance. So they don't have that pinch which those in the modes of passion and ignorance have. In the mode of passion, they're burning with the fire of wanting to achieve something. The mode of ignorance, just despair. So it's like wearing a shoe that is pinching, and you're anxious to take it off and wear something else. But if the shoe is comfortable, that desire is not there. So that is what the Devas are lamenting. That yes, we have acquired this so-called exalted position, but it is covering it is taking away the urgency to execute bhakti. It is covering our sense with easy sense gratification. So Prabhupada says the conclusion is that one who has taken birth in the land of Bharatvarsha must follow the instructions given personally by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yad gatvanana nivrate tad dhama paramam. One should try to return home back to Godhead, to the Vaikuntha planets, and live eternally over there. Okay, so moving on to the next verse, 23. Kalpayusham sthanajayat punarbhavat kshanayusham bharat bhujayo varam shanena martyena kritam manasvinaha sanya samyantya abhayam padam hare.
A short life in the land of Bharatvarsh is preferable to a life achieved in Brahmaloka for millions and billions of years, because even if one is elevated to Brahmaloka, he must return to repeated birth and death. Although life in Bharatvarsh is in a lower planetary system is very short, one who lives there can elevate himself to full Krishna consciousness and achieve the highest perfection, even in this short life, by fully surrendering unto the lotus feet of the Lord. Thus, one attains Vaikuntha Loka, where there is neither anxiety nor repeated birth in a material body.
So, so the Devas are using extrapolation to make a point. Now, they are not residents of Brahmaloka themselves, and Brahmaloka is the highest planet in the material world. So they're saying, what to speak of us who are residents of Svargloka? Like above Svargloka, there is Maharloka, Janloka, Tapaloka, and then there is Satyaloka or Brahmaloka, right? So far, far above them. So they're saying, what to speak of us? Even for one who has achieved Brahmaloka, the opportunity to perform devotional service is more important. Right now, the point that they make here is that a short life in the land of Bharatvarsha is preferable to a life achieved in Brahmaloka for millions and billions of years. Right? So Brahma lives for 311 trillion 40 billion years, very, very long life. They say he must return to repeated birth and death. Now, factually, that statement is not true, because it's understood that all the residents of the upper planetary system go back to Godhead. Janaloka, Taploka, Mahatloka, Brahmaloka, they all go back to Godhead. It's also understood that all the prominent demigods, like Indra and Surya, they go back to Godhead also. Now, there is no guarantee, of course, because going back to Godhead is predicated on one's free will, desire. But generally speaking, that understanding is that they go back to Godhead. So it's not that the statement made is he must return to repeated birth and death, but the context in which the devas are speaking is that of bhakti. So the point they're making is that a person living on Bharatvarsha executing bhakti is superior to a person living in Brahmaloka not executing bhakti. So which is the resident of Brahmaloka that will not go back to Godhead? One who does not execute bhakti. For him, the statement is true that he must return to repeated birth and death. And in that context, they're saying it's good because in Bharatvarsha, the maximum you can live, and this is of course in Kali Yuga, is 100 years. Now compare 100 years with 311 trillion 40 billion years. Right? It's like a twinkle. Brahma takes a breath and 100 years has passed. And in that time, the jiva is able to perfect his bhakti and go back to Godhead. Right? So that is the aspect that the devas are glorifying. They are essentially glorifying the potency of bhakti. And in Bharatvarsha, that ability to take to bhakti is very strong. Because the mercy of the Lord, because there is sufficient suffering to keep the person looking for ways to escape it, because of the presence of devotees. So all the confluence of all this is making Bharatvarsha an conducive place to take to bhakti. Prabhupada says that this is further confirmation of the statement given by Lord Chaitanya. Bharat bhumite hele manushya janma yara janma sartha kare karo paro upkara. And one who has taken birth in Bharat Bhumi, this is talking about India, janma sarthak karo. That sarthak means make your life worthwhile. And kara para upkara. And also help others. Right? So take to Krishna consciousness and help others also take to Krishna consciousness. Okay. Moving on to next verse, 24. Nayatra Vaikuntha Katha Sudhapaga Nasadva Bhagavatas Tada Shraya Nayat Trayakesha Makha Mahotsava Suresha Lokapi Navai Sasevatyam.
An intelligent person does not take interest in a place, even in the topmost planetary system, if the pure Ganges of topic concerning the Supreme Lord activities does not flow there. If there are not devotees engaged in devotional service on the bank of such a river of piety, or if there is no festival of Sankirtan Yagna to satisfy the Lord, especially since Sankirtan Yagna is recommended in this age.
So in this verse, the demigods, they are contrasting a place that is fit for residence and unfit for residence, right? And by implication, they're glorifying the birth in Bharata as a place that is fit for residence, as opposed to the birth in the heavenly kingdoms as a place that is unfit for residence, right? So three things they say make a person unfit for residence. So say the Nayatra Vaikunta Katha Sudhapaka, that there are no rivers of the sweet topics about the Lord. So essentially, what does it mean? That there is no Krishna Katha. Second, this is nasadvo bhagavatas tadashraya, that there are no devotees engaged in the service on the banks of such river, right? Which means there is no devotional service being performed. There is no bhakti being done. And third, they say is that nayatra yaggesha maka mahotsava. So the festival of Sankirtan, yagya to satisfy the Lord, is not being done, right? And so three things that they say, if there is no, and they use the metaphor of a river. So there is the river of Krishna Katha that is flowing on the banks of the river. There is the devotees who are engaged in devotional service. And how are they engaged? They're engaged in celebrating the festival of Sankirtan Yagya. So at a place where these things are not done, so then they say, Suresh Lokapi Navai Sa Sevatyam. That at a place where these three things are not being done, one should not accept residence, even if it is a planet of the demigods. Like even if it is Swargloka, there is no Krishna Katha, there is no Bhakti, and there is no Harinam Sankirtan that is done. Right? And Prabhupada in the purport, he continues to correlate this with the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He says in Chaitanya Bhagavad, it is confirmed that one should not desire to be elevated even to a place in the heavenly planetary system if it has no propaganda to expand the glories of the Supreme Personality, no trace of Vaishnavas, and no festivals for spreading Krishna consciousness. It would be better to live perpetually cramped within the airtight bag of a mother's womb. Right? So it's kind of said that within the womb, the jiva is actually experiencing hellish conditions. Right? In the third canto, there is a description of the suffering of the embryo in the womb. And in Chaitanya Bhagavad, it is said, better to stay there than to come out and be in a place where there is no devotee association, there is no festivals for spreading Krishna consciousness, and there is no glories of the Lord being spoken. Right? So it ends with saying, I pray not to be allowed to take birth in such a condemned place. So rather for me to suffer within the womb of my mother than to come in such a place. Okay. So moving on to verse 25. Praptanrajatam tvaya chajantavo Jnana kriya dravya kalapa sampratam Navayate rana punarbhavayate Bhuyo vanayoka ivayanti bandhanam.
Bharatvarsha offers a proper land and circumstances in which to execute devotional service, which can free one from the result of jnana and karma. If one obtain a human body in the land of Bharatvarsha with clear sensory organ, with which to execute the Sankirtan Yagna, but in spite of this opportunity he does not take to devotional service, he is certainly like liberated forest animal and bird that are careless and are therefore again bound by a hunter.
So you can see the devas are they're very much glorifying the birth in Bharatvarsha, and in this verse they're condemning those who are born in Bharatvarsha and are not able to take advantage of the opportunities that are offered over here. So they say certainly like a liberated forest animal that is again bound by the hunter. Right? They use this analogy that in Bharatvarsha there's an opportunity to go back to Godhead. But if one is careless, if one is not focused on the right goals of the life, they're again going to be bound by the snares of Maya. They're again going to be bound by the modes of material nature, and they're again going to be bound by the cycles of birth and death. Right? So So they say that human life in Bharat is fully endowed with Adidev, Adhyatma, and Adibhuta. So Adidev is Gyan, Adhyatma is Kriya, and Adibhuta is Dravya. Right? So essentially, this means that there is the senses, there is the sense objects, and then there is the demigods controlling the senses, or the ability to exercise the senses. So having attained all this, having attained the Adibhuta, Adidev, and Adi Atma, having attained Dravya, Gyan, and Kriya, or having attained the senses, the sense objects, and the sense devas, if one is not properly using them to hear and chant the holy name, then one is like a foolish forest animal. Like so Apunar Bhavya refers to Bhakti Yoga, that a person who is not engaging in Bhakti Yoga. They are like birds that are trapped by a hunter, and then the hunter somehow frees them. But then they come back into the cage and are caught again. As Prabhupada says, that in the land of Bharatvarsha, one can very easily perform the Sankirtan Yajna, which consists of Shravana Kirtana Vishnu. Or one can perform other methods of devotional service, such as Smarana Vandanam, Archanam Dasim, Sakyam, and Atmanivedana. In Bharatvarsha, one has the opportunity to visit many holy places, especially Lord Chaitanya's birth site and Lord Krishna's birth site, Navadvip and Vrindavan, where there are many pure devotees who have no desire other than to execute devotional service. Anabhilashita Shunyam Jnanakarmadi Navritam. And one may thus become free from the bondage of material conditions. Other paths, such as the path of Gyan and Karma, are not very profitable. And then he concludes, therefore, Mahaprabhu has advised those who have taken birth as a human being in Bharatvarsha must first realize himself as a part and parcel of Krishna. And after taking to Krishna consciousness, must distribute this knowledge all over the world. Okay, moving on to verse 26. Yai Shridaya Barishi Bhagasho Havir Niruttamishtham Vidimantravastutaha Eka Prahan Namabirahutamura Granati Purna Swayama Shisham Prabhu.
In India, Bharatvarsh, there are many worshippers of the demigod, the various officials appointed by the Supreme Lord, such as Indra, Chandra, and Surya, all of whom are worshipped differently. The worshippers offer the demigod their oblation, considering the demigod part and parcel of the whole, the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the Supreme Lord of Godhead accepts these offerings and gradually raises the worshipper to the real standard of devotional service by fulfilling their desire and aspiration. Because the Lord is complete, he offers the worshipper the benediction, the desire, even if they worship only part of his transcendental body.
So, interesting and important verse. So, Devas are now looking at the residents of Bharatvarsha from their perspective, from the perspective of the Devas. So, they say that in Bharatvarsha there are many worshippers of demigods, like Chandra, Indra, Surya, all of whom are worshipped differently. How do they worship them? They worship them offering the oblations of the sacrifice. But now they make an important distinction here. But if they worship them, considering them to be parts and parcel of the Supreme Lord, then that worship is also purified. right? So there may be residents who are attached to demigods, but as long as they're worshipping them in proper in the proper relationship to Krishna, Krishna is so compassionate that he even accepts those offerings. Right? So they are approaching the Lord indirectly. They're approaching the Lord with material desires. Because why do you go to demigods? Generally for material desires. But Krishna is so merciful that he extracts their bhava. He extracts their essence. That they may be going to the demigods, they may be asking for material benedictions, but nevertheless they're recognizing the fact that these demigods are my parts and parcel, and he helps them make advancements. So Prabhupada says that those who are advanced devotees, they only worship Krishna. But then there are some who worship the Lord as ekatvena prathaktvena. So ekatvena means one Lord, and prathaktvena essentially points to many parts. So ekatvena prathaktvena means worshipping the Lord who has many demigods as his parts. Right. So such devotees, their material desires are fulfilled by the prathaktvena. But because that ekatvena is always there in their consciousness, then Krishna still accepts them. So Krishna says that they are in Bhagavad Gita said they are hidragyana, not very intelligent, because they are approaching him but indirectly. And Prabhupada says what Krishna wants is direct devotion of bhakti. But still, akama sarva kamena moksha kama. So even if somebody is coming to Krishna with akam or sarvakam or mokshakam, tivrena bhakti yogena yajita purusham pur. That as long as one is going to Krishna with akam, no desires, sarvakam, full of desires, moksha, wanting liberation, whatever way one is going to Krishna, tivra bhakti yogena yajita purusham param. Right? So yajita, the root word of yajna is worship. The yajita means that because they are worshipping Purush, the Supreme Person, then Krishna, he extracts the essence and he reciprocates. He gives them the taste for bhakti. So tivrena bhakti yogena. The Prabhupada says, nevertheless, devotees who worship the demigods, the different parts of the Lord, receive the benediction they desire because the Lord is the original master. If anybody wants a particular benediction for the Lord to award, it is not at all difficult. So the question might come that if the indirect worship of the Lord is inferior, then why does the Lord even give the material benedictions? Why does he even keep that channel open? And that is explained in the next verse, verse 27. Satyam dithaste aritam aritanana neva tadoyat punararthitayatah swayam vidate bhajatam anichittam ichha pidanam nijapadapallavam.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead fulfills the material desires of a devotee who approaches him with such motive, but he does not bestow benediction upon the devotees that will cause him to demand more benediction again. However, the Lord willingly gives the devotee shelter at his own lotus feet, even though such a person does not aspire for it, and that shelter satisfies all his desires. That is the Supreme Personality's special mercy.
So this is an explanation of why the Lord offers material benedictions, either directly or through the demigods, to allow for pure devotional service to develop in the heart of the supplicant. He offers material benediction in a way that also purifies the material desires. That is one big difference between approaching Krishna with material desires and approaching demigods. The demigods, they fulfill the material desires in a way that increases the material desires. That you'll typically see that when Brahma comes in front of like Hiranyakashipu, and he's like, I want more, I want more, I want this, I want immortality. Those who are worshipping Lord Shiva, when Lord Shiva appears, give me this weapon, give me that. There's the case of Bhamasur, right? He was worshipping Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva came along with Parvati Devi. And he had already spent hundreds of years worshipping Lord Shiva. And then he sees Parvati Devi, and now he starts lusting after Parvati Devi. So that is the material mood. I want more, more, more. But when one goes to Krishna, then Krishna fulfills the material desires in such a way that he replaces them with spiritual desires. That's a special mercy of the Lord. So Vishnu Chakravarti says is that the practitioner of bhakti, even if he has material desires, by worshipping the Lord, he becomes nishkam. So material desires is kam. But the benediction of the Lord is that while he is fulfilling this material desires, he is extracting those desires also. And then Vishnu Chakravarti explains, why does this happen? He says that because the Lord, while fulfilling his material desires, also gives him a taste of bhakti. Then the person experiences the higher taste of bhakti and then loses his taste for material enjoyment. Right? So the example is that of Dhruva Maharaj. He went with material desires. I want a kingdom more than my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. Strong material desire. And as he was performing the process, so he went to whom? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, right? So he was chanting Krishna's name for material enjoyment. And the potency of the process is that as he was chanting that, he lost his material desires. And Krishna, when he came, or Lord Vishnu, when he came, he fulfilled his material desires. And Dhruva said, I don't really want it. I'm ashamed that I want it. And Lord Vishnu said, no, you take it. So Dhruva took, he got a kingdom higher than even that of Brahma, but he ruled in a way that was a service to the Lord. So what he was initially deeming for his own personal ego, now he was doing it only as the service of the Lord. So externally, one can say he went to the Lord for the kingdom, the Lord gave him a kingdom. Internally, the mood was completely different. Earlier, he wanted the kingdom to show Maharaj Uttanpad, that his own father, that I'm actually superior to you. But when he got the kingdom, he acquired a position of the greatest humility. Vishwanath Chakravarti also says that another meaning of this verse is that the Lord forcibly gives his lotus feet, which destroys all material hankering. So the analogy he says is that just as a father, when he sees that his son is eating dirt, he gives him sugar candy, even if the son is not asking for sugar candy. However, after tasting the sugar candy, the child, he develops a taste for sugar candy and loses the taste for dirt. Right? So the person is going for material desires, and Krishna gives him a higher taste, because of which he loses the lower taste. So what are the devas saying? And this is essentially a reiteration of the verse Akama Sarva Kama Va Moksha Kamodaribi. Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yukta Paramam Purush. That whether one is freed from material desires or full of material desires or wants liberation, he should engage in devotional service. And Srila Prabhupada, he continues to collaborate this with statements from Lord Chaitanya. Prabhupada says this is explained in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela, that a devotee may desire other than the service to the lotus feet of the Lord, but if he engages in Krishna's service, Krishna gives him shelter at his lotus feet, even though he does not aspire for it. Right? Krishna's. So this is sometimes known as Agyat Sukriti, because devotional service comes indirectly. That somebody wants to give in charity, and the person says that I will give in charity, but I need to be glorified. And the temple people will say, yes, fine, Prabhu. So the person gives in charity with a desire to be glorified. But then because he's giving for the service of the Lord and the Vaishnavas, then his consciousness gets purified. Right? So Vishwanath Chakravarti concludes saying the achievement of the Lord's lotus field by Sakam or Akam should not be considered as the same. Right? So he's still making this distinction that if the Sakam devotees are acquiring his lotus feet, then where is the glory for Anabhilashita, Shunyam? But the point is that there are many cadres of Lord's devotees. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad says that is why the excellence of Hanuman is greater than that of Dhruv Maharaj. Because Hanuman is an Akam devotee. Now, of course, this is reflecting more a particular state of Dhruva, because Dhruva eventually became a pure devotee. Otherwise, he would not have gone back to Vaikuntha. But at the stage where he was Sakam, one can consider that Hanuman was greater than him. Okay, so moving on to verse 28. Yadiyatra naha swarga sukhavasheshitam svitasya sukhatasya kritasya shobhanam tena janabe smriti majjanmana isyad varshe hariryad bhajatam shamatanoti.
We are now living in the heavenly planets, undoubtedly as a result of our having performed ritualistic ceremonies, past activities and yajnas, and having studied the Veda. However, our life here will one day be finished. We pray that at that time, if any merit remains from our past activities, we may again take birth in Bharatvarsh as human beings, able to remember the lotus feet of the Lord. The Lord is so kind that he personally come to the land of Bharatvarsh and expand the good fortune of its people.
So this is the verdict of the Devas. They are saying, considering all the benefits of the birth in Bharatvarsha, that whether they are Akam or Sakam, if somehow or else they are able to associate with devotees and the Lord, their lives are perfect. So they are saying, we are praying that we may take birth on the land of Bharatvarsha as devotees. Right? And Prabhupada, again, he continues the instructions of Mahaprabhu. He says that those who are already born in Bharatvarsha should take lessons from Shastra and Guru and should take full advantage of the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to be fully equipped with Krishna consciousness. By taking full advantage of Krishna consciousness, one goes back home, back to Godhead. Yanti mad, yajinopi mad. The Krishna consciousness movement is therefore spreading this facility to human society by opening many, many centers all over the world, so that people may associate with pure devotees of Krishna consciousness movement and understand the science. So in the next verse, Srila Prabhupada, he develops the same theme further. He says that in Karma Puran, there is the statement that is about the desires of the demigods, that although the demigods are situated in an exalted position in the heavenly planets, they nevertheless desire to descend to the land of Bharatvarsha on the earth planet. This indicates that even the demigods are unfit to reside in Bharatvarsha. Therefore, if persons already born in Bharatvarsha live like cats and dogs, not taking full advantage of their birth in this land, they are certainly unfortunate. Okay, so that concludes the glorification of the residents of Bharatvarsha, right? And then in the remaining 3 verses is a description of Jambudvipa there. So let me pause over here and see if there is any comments or any discussion on what we have spoken so far.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. One of the points that you made that was really striking was, you compared how a human life on an average is 100 years, but for Brahma, it's 311 trillion plus so many millions of years. But within that, speck of a time is this opportunity to perfect our human form of life. And so that was that was it brought our life to it gave some perspective how tiny we are, and yet how fortunate we are that the same opportunity is given for us. So thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you. And the result is the same, that whether Brahma performs bhakti for 311 trillion years or we perform it for within our limited lifespan of 100 years, our destination is the same. So so we have access to the same to the same potency. Okay, any other thoughts?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Yeah, there is a, I've heard this many times in many lectures, that like for us devotees, we're doing, of course, devotional service. And if we have a tinge of material desire, and if we don't take birth again on this earth, let's say we go to the higher planetary system, the danger is, of course, the lifespan will be like thousands and thousands of years. And when we say the golden time that Prabhupada has said, 10,000 years, ISKCON will be here, the Hare Krishna movement, the name of Krishna will be heard. And by the time, if we go there in this, Swarga Road or whatever, happened to system, when our pious karma is finished, bank balance is finished, we fall down on this material earth, 10,000 years will be gone. And then we will be faced with tremendous hardship in the Kali Yuga that will be like wildfire, burning everything.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, I think even I heard that. I think this is Prabhupada quoting Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhakti, or maybe Bhakti Vinod Thakur, but the statement was that don't delay, finish your business in this life. Don't come back because it's dangerous. And for the reason that you're saying, and you come back and the conditions may be so degraded that opportunity to take to bhakti is no longer there. And also the detour that you might take might become a long detour. You get elevated. Krishna is rewarding you for your bhakti by giving you an elevated birth, but then you get bewildered by the opulences of that birth. And of course, bhakti never goes away, but the progress becomes is kind of slowed down or stopped at that time. So Prabhupada would say this to instill a set sense of urgency, because at one point there are statements like bhakti is eternal, bhakti never goes away, you start from wherever you stopped. So it gives a little bit of complacency. Also that if one commences on the part of bhakti, then the ending is inevitable, that they will go back to Godhead. There's no other it's a path that goes at only one direction, that you end up going back to Godhead. So these assurances can instill complacency also. So, so the acharyas, they basically talk about these very valid points, that don't be too complacent, because you may spend another million lifetimes doing stuff that you don't want to do, as opposed to going back to Godhead in this very lifetime.
Yeah. Then one more point, Prabhu, is about Dasrath Maharaj. Okay, when Ram was being banished and he passed away by chanting the name of Ram, and he was calling his name all the time. But still, he did not go back to Godhead. He went to the higher planet, as far as we understood. And because on some verses they say that, Ram even went to see him, in somewhere, or he came. But one of those questions was asked to Maharaj, and when Maharaj was here, and Maharaj confirmed that yes, Dasrath Maharaj did not go back to Godhead. But now, because of his desire to fulfill the desire of his wife, Kekai, that one of the reasons. But then the question will be, it is said that whenever we think about something at the moment of death, if we take the name of Krishna, we go back to Godhead. Okay, I know it's a pastime, but it's a bit, I won't say like difficult to understand this type of scenario.
Yeah, you're right. I'm personally not aware of the details, but you're right. It is difficult that a person who is actually the father of the personality of Godhead, and he died chanting the name of Lord Ram. But devotees of that caliber, their activities are not bound by rules and regulation. They're bound by their desires and the desires of the Lord. It's a different category of devotees. For us, we can be assured that if we chant the name of the Lord and die, we'll go back to Godhead.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I don't know how to frame this question. It was going on in my mind from the preaching perspective, even though I just wanted to kind of realign my thoughts in that. We say Bharatvarsh, or this material world, is a reflection of the spiritual world. And as we do our devotional service, we do attain the higher planets, or they go back to Godhead, right? So that's an opportunity. That's what we discussed all this time. But at the same time, just recently I was hearing to Swayam Bhagwan Keshav Maharaj, or a few other lectures also prior, where we say that this material world is, he was directly, even Jayadutta Swami, right? Like this material world is just like a stool, right? So how do you comprehend that? Like, yes, there is an urgent need for us to get out of this, but at the same time, sometimes we feel like, oh, this is the opportunity where we should refine our devotional service over here, or get through that process. Again, this is only from the perspective of how to understand it clearly for the preaching purposes.
Okay. So if I understand your question, you're saying that at one point it's said that the material world is contemptible, it's like stool.
Yeah.
And then another point we say that this is a glorious place where you can perfect your bhakti. How do we reconcile these two?
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Prabhu. It's a good question. And it's kind of reflected in the prayers by the demigods, because if you notice that when they're glorifying the birth in Bharat Bhumi, they're always glorifying it in conjunction with those who take to devotional service, whether they take to it directly or indirectly. Right? They're glorifying it in that context. So Bharat Bhumi is glorified because there are many opportunities to perform devotional service. Srila Prabhupada would say that you scratch an Indian, you'll get a devotee. So devotional service is very, very close to their surface. But then many do not take to devotional service. And for them, all those paradigms apply. It's like a stool, it's contemptible, it's a downward spiral. And it applies more so to them because having gotten the opportunity, they have squandered it away. So it applies more so to them. So the glories of Bharatvarsha applies to those, not just because somebody is born in Bharatvarsha, but it applies to those who are born in Bharatvarsha and are able to take advantage of the facilities for devotional service in Bharatvarsha. I remember that when I go back to India, which coincidentally Friday I'm going back to India, even if you go for a morning walk through the most congested part of the city, you will inevitably come across temples. Somewhere, they may not be like pure Vaishnava temples, but they will always have Lord Ram, Krishna, Durga, Shiva. And one of those cases that, somebody is going to Durga Devi and saying, give me this, give me that, just out of formality, they will give obeisance to Krishna also. Right? Devotional service started over there. And if you're a little bit more fortunate, if you're association of devotees, I mean, look at Delhi. Take a guess, how many ISKCON temples are there in Delhi?
Oh, a big temple.
4 big temples. There are 17 temples in Delhi. Right? There's 17 temples, and some of them are really big, really big temples that are all built by local funds. Right? So that conducive environment is there. Some people, even though they may not be inclined to it, they get exposed to it, and the bhakti begins. And then those who are fortunate are able to take a full advantage of the opportunity. For them, all this glorification by the devas applies. And for those who cannot take, all the condemnation that comes through our other understanding. This is Martya Loka, people are constantly dying, people's body is abominable, they are bags of stool and urine, all those condemnation that comes to the people of Bharatvarsha, that applies. Okay, there is nothing else. So we have 3 more verses before the end of the chapter. So verse 29 and 30, verses in prose. So Sang Prabhu, if you can read the translation.
Sri Sukadev Goswami said, "My dear king, in the opinion of some learned scholars, 8 smaller islands surrounded Jambudvipa. When the son of Maharaj Saghara were searching all over the world for their lost horse, they dug up the earth, and in this way 8 adjoining islands came into existence. The name of these islands are Swarna Prashta, Chandra Shukla, Avartana, Ramanaka, Mandara Harina, Panchajanya, Simhara, and Lanka."
So Sukadeva Goswami now takes over the narrative again. And if you remember, the broad context of this is a description of Jambudvip. Right? So, and you see why this has been described, because Sukadeva Goswami has no interest in astronomy per se, but is describing the structure of the universe to demonstrate how in every corner of the universe there is glorification of Krishna going on. So even a place as humble as Bharatvarsha. So later on we'll see that in the whole universe that we have, Bharatvarsha has the most within quotes fallen position, even compared to the lower planetary systems, keeping aside the hellish planets there and more in the subtle realm. But even looking at Sutal and Taratal, Atal, the planets of the Gandharvas and the Charans, the Swargas, everywhere there is more opulence. Everywhere the residents have longer lives and more opportunities to enjoy, right? So he's saying even as a place that is as miserable and fallen and devoid of excellence as Bharatvarsha is glorious because of the performance of devotional service. It's kind of like saying that even the most fallen becomes the most glorious because of the connection with Krishna. Right? So now he turns back to his original stream of describing Jambudvip. So he has finished the description of Jambudvip, right? He talked about the 9 Varshas in Jambudvip, starting from Ilavat Varsha, goes further north all the way to the Uttar Kuru Varsha. It does not really go in a specific direction, kind of jumps back and forth, but then finally comes down to the southernmost part, which is Bharatvarsha, Bharatkhanda. Now he's talking about the islands around Jambudvip. Now, important to know that these are not the dvipas in Bhumandal. Like we know that Bhumandal, there are 7 dvipas. Right? Inside there is Jambudvip, then Palaksha Dvip, then Shalmali Dvip, Kusha Dvip, Kransha Dvip, what's the Shak? I forget the name. But the dvips are there. These are not that dvips. These are actually very small islands that are just south of Bharatvarsha. And Sukhdev Goswami says they were created by the 60,000 sons of Maharaj Sagar. So we know that past time that the horse was kidnapped by Indra, and when that horse was kidnapped, then Maharaj Sagar sent his 60,000 sons, and they were searching everywhere. They searched all over the entire Bhumandal. They could not find. When Maharaj Sagar was ruling the Bhumandal. So they rolled all over the Bhumandal, could not find. Then Maharaj Sagar said that maybe they have gone to the subterranean planets. So then they started digging. So there were 60,000 sons, and each one of them dug 1 yojana. So they essentially dug a tunnel that was 60,000 yojanas deep. And that went right down to the bottom, to Patal, to the ashram of Kapila Muni. Right? So what happened to the soil that they were digging out at the time? So they were digging out that soil and they were putting it into the ocean. So the Bharatvarsha, as we know, it is perched on the ocean of salt water. This is different from the ocean within the planet. There is the larger ocean in Jambudvip, right? The ocean of salt water. So the Bharatvarsha is perched on that ocean. So they were putting that into this water, and in this way they created several islands. Right. So the names are given over here. So some of the islands are familiar to us. So we know Lanka. So Lanka is the residence of Ravan. Now this also tells us that Lanka is not the Lanka that we think, that is in the south of India, but the Lanka is the island that is actually this on the saltwater ocean that is south of Jambudvip. That's the Lanka. That's why Hanuman had to jump all the way to there. Then Simala, and I may not be. I mean, I'm kind of guessing over here that this is the place of residence of Simika. That Simika is the sister of Prahlad Maharaj, right? And she is the one who stopped Hanuman from going, and she had this benediction that that passing over her would become her food, and then essentially Hanuman kills her at that time. Then the another island that is named is Ramanak Island. So does anybody remember the relevance of Ramanak Island?
Kalia pastime.
Yes, very good. So Kalia was initially a resident of the Ramanak Island, and there he got into trouble with Garuda. So he left that island and he came all the way and he started living in Bharatvarsha in the river Yamuna. And then when Krishna dances on his head and chastises him, he says, go back to Ramanaka. And there, when Garuda will see my footprints on your hoods, he will leave you alone. So these are all the islands created by the sons of Sagar. Okay. Now moving on to the last verse, verse 31. Go ahead, Prabhu.
My dear King Parikshit, O best of the descendants of Bharat Maharaj, Bharata Maharaj, sorry. I have thus described to you, as I myself has been instructed, the island of Bharatvarsha and its adjoining island. These are the islands that constitute Jambudvipa.
So this is the last verse, and this is the segue into the remaining 7 chapters of the canto. So there, the topics of Vedic cosmology will be discussed in greater details, ending in the chapter 26, which is the description of the hellish planets. So the 20th chapter is titled "Studying the Structure of the Universe." So I know we have about half an hour or a little less than half an hour. I'm not going to start the chapter now. So essentially, the chapter is most of the verses do not have any purports in this chapter. So the chapter essentially is a recitation of the verses of the translation of the verses. We can do that in the next class. I can just give you a little bit of an overview of how the Bhagavatam approaches Vedic cosmology, right? And then maybe we can have some discussion on that. So Sukadeva Goswami begins with describing Jambudvipa, right? And the reason it begins to describe it is because he's obviously speaking to Parikshit Maharaj. And Parikshit Maharaj is the ruler of Jambudvipa. So it is said that in the Dwapar Yuga, the emperors were ruling Jambudvipa. And that's why we see the Pandavas, they travel to subterranean or to Bhaumya Sarga, not subterranean, to heavenly planets on the Bhumandal. They cross the greater Himalayas. Arjuna actually ascends to Svargloka, because in Dwapar Yuga, that was where that was the scope of their rule. In Treta Yuga and earlier on, the kings were essentially ruling the Bhumandal. So they were ruling the entire middle planetary system. So personalities like Lord Ram, Amrish Maharaj, etc., they were actually ruling the entire Bhumandal. So because Sukadeva Goswami is speaking to Parikshit Maharaj, he begins with describing his own kingdom. That this is where you are, this is Jambudvip, speaks about Bharatvarsha, that he is a resident of Bharatvarsha. In the remaining 7 chapters, Sukadeva Goswami, he describes the universe from 3 perspectives. He will describe it horizontally, he will describe it vertically, and he will describe it dynamically. So when he describes it horizontally, he describes the Bhumandal. Right. So the Bhumandal essentially is the middle planetary system that spans the entire diameter of the universe. So he will describe the 7 dvipas, the 7 islands, the residents of the dvipas, the characteristics of the islands. Then he will go vertically up, and he will describe the heavenly planets. So before that, he will describe. So we have Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha. So he will describe Bhuvarloka, which is Antariksh, which is the intermediate area between Bhumandal and Svargloka, where demigods, but from of a lower, slightly lower, like the Vidyadharas, the Charans, the Gandharvas, they reside, the Siddhas, they reside over there. And then he will go up, and then describe the heavenly kingdom. Describe Suryalok, Chandralok, the 7 planetary system, going all the way up till the topmost of the Swargalok, and then he will go further up, and he will describe the Saptarishis, describe Dhruvloka, describe the 4 upper planetary system, all the way to Satyaloka. Right now, what we'll see is that his description becomes less and less specific and more general as he goes up. So Jambudvip he has described in a lot of details. Bhumandal he will describe with some details. But then as he goes up, his details become lesser and lesser. He mentions them by name. He will give some understanding of their relative positions. That's it. And by the time he has crossed Dhruvaloka, then he just mentions that there are these 4 planetary systems that go into Brahmaloka. He won't even talk about how wide they are. What is the constitution. He just talks very, very generally. And then he goes down and he talks about the seven subterranean swargas, essentially beginning from Atal all the way to Patal, which again he does not describe in a lot of details. So after describing the universe horizontally and vertically, then he describes the motion of the planets and the universe, that how are seasons created, how do eclipses happen, how does day and night happen, and that's where it becomes the Bhagavatam becomes complicated to understand, because Sukadeva Goswami does not talk in great details. So like when the devotees were building the Vedic planetarium, Prabhupada said, based on the Bhagavatam does not give sufficient knowledge. It just makes reference to them. So then they supplement it from other scriptures like Bhugol Varnam and Surya Siddhant. Surya Siddhant is the book that was translated by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So, and from different other sources, they take help from that and supplement the Bhagavatam knowledge. And even then, it's a little complicated to understand how the planets move, how do days and nights happen, why do eclipses happen, etc. So next time when we meet, we will do chapter 20. And then, as I mentioned, that as we do the chapters, we'll get some understanding. And then I will take some time separately to talk about Bhagavad cosmology as a whole. And that way we can put everything together. So we read the Bhagavatam, which is part of our reading of the Bhagavatam, part of our Bhakti Vaibhava. We read through till the 27th chapter. And then we'll take a step back and then bring it together, supplement it with other informations that we have, and do an overview of Bhagavad cosmology as a whole. Okay, so that was my intro to it. I'll pause and see if there's any comments.
The cosmology, Prabhu, is very interesting, but sometimes very difficult to grasp.
Especially with just words. So you can see Sukdev Goswami had a difficult task. He was describing just using words. So it's easier to understand with illustrations. And we'll see the difference. I think reading the chapters will give us familiarity with the terms, will give us some understanding of how it happens. But when we see the slides, when we see the videos, it becomes a little easier to understand. I don't think we'll ever, it's a complicated subject. We won't understand it completely, but it'll give us better understanding.
Yeah. Okay.
It was also good. I heard for the first time about in the prior verse about Lanka or Ramanaka. Maybe somewhere it is written for this Swarnaprastha Chandra Shukla Avartana. The purpose. Maybe it's in the purport. I didn't read that.
Possible, true. Okay, so my plan so far at least is that I'll continue with the discussions from India. I think that the timings will work out okay. It'll be early morning in India, unless something happens, unless things change. But at least my plan now is that we'll just continue with our discussions. Okay, so we'll end over here a little early. Thank you. वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितनाम पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की जय। शिला प्रभुपाद की जय। जय गौर प्रेमानंद। हरि हरि। Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.